I have mixed feelings on the third season of Danny Phantom when it comes to people saying that it had less episodes than the previous two seasons, and the fact that it had a rush finale, Phantom Planet. For me personally, I honestly think that it's mostly depressing because the more you think about it, I honestly think that this show could have more seasons if they didn't renew Fairly Odd Parents in the first place. I understand that Bush Hartman made both shows at around the time of 2004 to 2006, but when you completely think about it of how the third season could have been like if he actually did continue on working on the show, then I honestly think that then we will probably get more seasons from Danny Phantom than what we got from the newer episodes of the Fairly Odd Parents. I know it's mostly a theory from my point of view, but at the same time, Season 3 is honestly really depressing, especially the episode I'm going to be looking at, Girls' Night Out. Why do I consider this depressing? Well, for one, it had potential, but at the same time, the execution, like the episodes that I reviewed for this month, are just poorly done and not really focused to the point that what we ended up with could have been a whole different story. The episode starts with Danny and Johnny facing each other yet again, and as it turns out, the only reason why Johnny is completely facing Danny is because he wants to take out all of his anger, because he had a fight with Kitty because he really was into his bike more than her. I honestly think that this type of plot is honestly really stupid, and I honestly think that the idea of just having Johnny being obsessed with something else with his bike and not with someone else is honestly a lot more hard to be convinced of how Kitty's motivations in this episode leads to hanging out with Ember and Spectre in order to take over Amy Park. If you really ask me, the thing is, I honestly think that Johnny in the show is considered good for his first appearance and his second appearance in 13 and Lucky in Love, but in this episode, it really goes to show that the Wilds really don't know what to do with him in this episode. And this is what leads to one of the biggest issues with this episode. Since it's trying to lead up to the man being extinct while he's leaving the woman into the entire park to themselves, it makes the plot way too sexist to the point that it's hammering in. And I understand that this is the type of plot that might work when it comes to the characters becoming old and understanding how they can learn from the other, but at the same time, Scarlet, and Johnny is just basically stereotypes that are just dealing with this situation. And what makes this even more stranger is that Scarlet is actually Ember's girlfriend. Well, Ember's boyfriend, actually. I honestly found that hard to believe. When it comes to episodes that are planned, I honestly think that this episode is mostly the ones that are probably the least thinking about, and I honestly think that the episodes that the people who scrapped would have been a lot more better than what we saw from this episode. And when Ember, Kitty, and Spectre have a conversation with Bertrand, if that's his name, sorry, though arguments with their boyfriends is honestly mostly stupid, because Ember completely mentioned that Scarlet can't find the TV remote because of how sloppy he is and not really the best at being her boyfriend. I don't even know if that's either a way to be funny, but at the same time, this show's humor just isn't really the best, and unlike other episodes I've seen from the show, this episode's humor is honestly the weakest. Now, Kitty completely uses her kiss of death to completely disappear a human being or a ghost being that is a male away, and the only way to bring them back is when she kisses it again, which gave her friends a plan of what they can do in Amity Park. Meanwhile, Danny and his father are gonna go fishing for the majority of this episode. Yeah, they're not gonna be in any presence during the whole situation involving the antagonists in this episode. This is one of the biggest reasons onto why they're trying to make this a female-centered episode, but it's honestly hammered in. if you really ask me, I honestly think that Danny is one of those I honestly think that they still need Danny in order to stop the trio from taking over Enemy Park. After all, he's in the cover of this, and when you see the the trio just look at him, and he's completely worried and concerned, like he does in almost every other title card in this show. You would usually expect a serious battle between Danny and towards Amber, Kitty, and Spectre, but apparently we don't get that. Yes, I did mention that this is a Ghost Center episode, but let's keep going on to why this is a really poor idea. Jazz in this episode is honestly really hard to take her seriously. I get that she isn't ruthless and she isn't rude, which I could give her a plus for that, but for what she's trying to do involving trying to be a ghost hunter like Sam and Tucker is honestly forced for how they're trying so hard to make this a Ghost Center episode. And when you see Sam and Tucker just completely running away for what Jazz has when it comes to becoming a ghost hunter, it's honestly forced, especially since that this conflict involving Sam and Jazz, involving that she isn't a ghost hunter and they mostly bickered, isn't really interesting. As a matter of fact, it's one of those stories that we've seen before, that whether you meet someone from time to time and then that someone joins your team, you will always have second thoughts around that. Granted, Jazz and Tucker are going to be giving Jazz a chance, but at the same time, this leads to more onto how this episode tries so hard to have Jazz's mother to be part of this. Believe me when I say this, is that even though that Maddie doesn't do a lot in this episode, I honestly think that she is really forced into this episode just to have Sam and Jazz be with someone, since that Tucker is completely disappeared. Don't worry, I'm gonna get to that soon. When the trio meets Johnny, they want to take revenge on him. And meanwhile, Sam and Tucker just trying to tell Jazz that it's really important and actually take the stuff seriously whether you're a ghost hunter. But at the same time, this just leads to what's going to happen at the end of the episode, where Jazz actually does something right and they actually make up at the end. I honestly think that this is mostly forced, and the more this episode keeps going, the more it's actually starting to become really repetitive. Not saying that it's frustrating, but at the same time, the phone-in stuff just makes this episode a prime example onto how the other scrapped episodes would have been a better decision than this episode. And when we get back to the trio trying to take down Johnny, we see the boys completely worshipping Embo again, like in her first appearance from the show. I honestly think, and this leads to another issue, is that they treat men as fanboys, like mad fanboys, that they fight each other. Even if that's supposed to be the joke of the episode, it still continues the man stereotype of completely being sloppy and just completely fighting against each other in order to get the goal that they want. I honestly don't find that funny, and as a matter of fact, it's actually really phoned in, and it really makes this episode a lot more stupider to take it seriously. And then when Ember and Kitty completely combine their Kiss of Death and their solo music together, it wipes off all the boys and they wiped up all the males inside all over Enemy Park, and with only the females into the spell while completely worshipping the trio. I would consider this a good way to actually have this the main focus of this type of plot, but at the same time, it just leads to really stupid scenes that is just basically the same thing that you see in the earlier episodes, like Ember performing his concert, and the other people in her friends, Kitty and Spectre, just completely do their own thing. It's just basically the same episode all over again, except done even less interesting. And as for Danny and his father, they didn't get effect from the spell because they went to a lake that you're safe from sales now that you're a lake area. I can't spell that name. Yeah, this plot hole is honestly really stupid, and I don't think that this is the type of stuff that can actually work. If you ever see an episode that had this sign and completely just telling you that you're safe from any other spell, that's not convenient. That's plot convenience of stupidness. And I'm not saying that because it's really the fact of this episode. I'm saying that because Danny really doesn't even do much in this episode other than just stopping Skullclaw and just going fishing with his father. And the scenes that we've seen him doing fishing and facing off Skullclaw is honestly not really interesting, since that Skullclaw is just trying to take out revenge on Danny because he lost his girlfriend, Amber. If there's one thing that makes this a lot more lazier, is the fact that Danny has to not be in his ghost form in front of his father, otherwise his secret will be exposed. And the way to stop Skullclaw is using the tools that he brought along for his fishing trip. And to be quite honest, it's honestly not that interesting and not that entertaining, unlike in the other fight scenes that we've seen from Danny Phantom. I honestly think that this is the type of stuff that can actually work with the other characters facing the Skullclaw. But at the same time, since that this is a female-centered episode, I guess they should probably have to have the males fight the other males in order to make this a way more pleasant experience for the males. But at the same time, it doesn't make this episode a lot more entertaining. It just makes it really poorly executed and really weak. And believe me, the jokes involving his father not knowing what's truly going on is honestly the weakest bit of this. Believe me. When he completely noticed that Danny's completely wet, Danny said that it was raining. And then when he completely looked up at the sky, there was no clouds, and he just completely said that he was probably seeing things because he was eating cheese or something. I don't consider this humor. As a matter of fact, it's honestly really difficult to actually take this kind of situation seriously, where we actually get to see Danny's father being this way and not realizing the fact that, well, if you completely see someone, which is your son, completely wet, you would instantly assume that he jumped in the water. And when you completely look up at the sky and completely think otherwise, that's not funny. As a matter of fact, it's actually it really makes this season a lot more stupider and hard to take it seriously, especially find any enjoyment out of it. Getting back to the main plot involving Sam and Jazz, when they completely want the mother to help them out, it seems mostly interesting to have Danny's mother into this, but at the same time, it just leads to the statement that I made before, is that they don't have another female in order to join in on stopping the trio, making this way more crucible onto why Danny shouldn't have been the main focus in this episode by stopping the three trio. And the fact that we don't get to see Johnny and Skullclaw again after this. Well, not really after this, but after the defeats, when it comes to meeting the trio again, is honestly difficult to actually take this a little bit more understandable. Understandable is that the fact that when we see the trio completely take it over Anime Park, they're just doing the cooking show. Amber is just completely doing another concert. And as for Kiki, well, he's doing the boot camp. I honestly think that even though that these ghosts with their different personalities may be unique, but when we completely see them before, and the fact that they're doing them again in this, doesn't make this a lot more entertaining. As a matter of fact, it kind of pats out the entire episode's runtime for the sake of having more mixes of the males being gone after the 12-hour time limit. And in all honesty, it's not really good to actually see Sam, Jazz, and Maddie going through this situation, because it's honestly more forced and it's honestly way more lazier than you completely think about it. Seriously, it's mostly, when I first watched this episode, I consider this more weakly than the fact that they only had to make the woman do something serious but didn't execute them at the right perfect time, when it comes to them facing off the trio of the females. You know, as much as I really admire the fact that I did review the Flaming with the Flames episode, I honestly think that episode did a lot more better since that it was focusing on one villain. And unlike the song in this, which was at best mediocre, the song in Amber's appearance was a lot more better. Mainly the fact that she took over Emily Park by herself. And when she had help, it is interesting, but the execution just doesn't do it well when it's mainly about saying that males are just not as good as females and they're sexist and stuff like that. Do I actually think that this is the type of story that I want to see from returning villains? As a matter of fact, I will probably add different villains or new villains instead of just recycling villains from before. And just seeing Jazz, Maddie, and Sam getting into these situations in embarrassment and failure is just padding up this episode a lot longer than it needs to be. And believe me, I would consider this fine when we see the females get some kind of a spotlight, but at the same time, what they're doing in this episode is honestly hard to actually see the serious world of what Danny Phantom is mainly about. Besides, the bickering between Sam and Jazz is honestly doesn't help whatsoever, since that this is the episode where they actually get along, but at the same time, Sam just barely gives Jazz a chance, and Jazz, let's just say that she's mostly into cute stuff. Now, I don't blame her on that, that's basically her character, but at the same time, I honestly think that what she's doing in this episode, I honestly think that her war might be much more better if she wasn't like this. I get that the villains that she's facing isn't really that menacing, but at the same time, she should at least take the whole fact seriously that all of his male friends are completely going to be disappearing. And even though, and the fact that Danny didn't get disappeared makes this risks and feel in the anxiety from Jazz that could have happened, make it really hard to convince if Danny was actually part of this. Seriously. And I do not mean that to be a bit rude. I mean that because of how they treat the females as better than males, but at the same time, they have the males just go fishing while have most of the males in Emily Park disappear. And when we get to see Danny and his father doing something, it just acts filler with nothing special going on other than having Skullclaw doing something. And then when we get to see Danny's father actually do something good, it's just forced out of nowhere. And it's only for the sake of having Danny keeping his secret from his parents even more. I don't consider this good. As a matter of fact, it's honestly it's just depressing to see them just capturing the ghosts after walking together. And as for the main plot, well, Sam has to dress up as a boy. I will admit that it was cool, but at the same time, it's only a way to actually have Sam just trying to fool the trio in order to do the spell again by completely eliminating all the males. And when they do that, Maddie completely uses her invention in order to completely reverse the spell and having the males return after just before the 12-hour time limit is gone. And then we get to see Sam in the Fenton Ghost Peeler, which is the only time we ever get to see her in the outfit. And all I can say is that at least we have this ability in Nicktoons' Battle for Volcano Island. As a matter of fact, it's literally the best things I've seen from that video game since we can play Sam in that outfit, but in all honesty, it still isn't enough since that it's only used at the end of this episode. And then when we get to see the ghost completely sucking the trio back in, it's good, but at the same time, it's honestly not that special. If Danny was in this, he will probably make the make the trio disappear a lot more better. Not saying that what the strategy that Jazz and Maddie are doing is considered terribly, but at the same time, the execution of the plot and villains in this is honestly what drags it down. And that's really all I have to say, other than the fact that Danny and his father return, and seeing that Sam and Jazz are hanging out together. And as far as I'm concerned, this face what they made at the end, that Danny mentioned that they missed something, it really goes to show that this episode is truly sexist towards males, that they're not smart enough. I really think that when it comes to season 3 of Danny Phantom, I think that they could have done a lot more better than what we've ended up getting from this episode. All I can say is that Girls Night Out is honestly one of the most weakest and one of the most underdeveloped episodes when it comes to returning villains, having the male characters disappear except Danny and his father for forced reasons, and the fact that Sam, Jazz, and Maddie in this is just for the sake of having the females facing off the trio. Now look, I have nothing against with females taking the spotlight that the males can actually be set on the sidelines. I'm okay with that. It's even better than having the females push around the males, since that this episode doesn't push them around. Sure, they did sexist remarks, but still. But at the same time, I honestly think that this could have been a lot more better if it didn't felt this way. Danny Phantom leaving is one thing, but have him not completely disappear because of a situation because of a location that didn't have him and his father disappear is honestly forced, and it really makes this subplot a lot more stupider the more you think about it. I honestly think that everything I've seen in this involving Scarco's encounters with Danny is just forced, and seeing Jess just trying to fit in with Sam and Tucker is honestly not really a good thing. It's not really something I would like to see again. I mean, granted, I haven't keep up with the show like every other cartoon, but if I was interested in this, I honestly think that they could have been. I honestly think that they could have done a lot more better than what we've seen today. Especially since that they made Jazz way more happy and way full of not taking anything seriously, while Sam mostly takes stuff seriously. This is the third season. This is an episode that came out from the third season, and after expressing everything, I think you can pretty much understand onto why this is considered the least from fans from the fandom. I really wish that I could have get this episode a lot more credit, but for how it's like this, I really can't. It's starting to become really redundant, and I honestly think that if Butch Hartman had the ability to make more episodes from this season and more seasons in the future, like 4 or 5, if he is interested back then, I really think that the execution of this would have been a lot more better than just having the girls being better than males for one of the wrong reasons. And since that these characters are in high school, it's really hard to actually see the sexist remark in this completely. Yes, Danny Phantom is a show, but at the same time, it's not like the Fairly Odd Parents. Granted, this episode is a whole lot better than Love Struck, which treats males as slobs and disgusting, but at the same time, they really didn't know how to make this whole situation involving the males and females comparison a lot more better in this episode. They did a lot more better in the Fairly Odd Parents in the Queen episode, where Timmy dressed up as a girl and Trixie is dressed up as a male, but still. All in all, this episode is honestly it's just one of those disappointments from cartoons like these. Danny Phantom may be a good show, but for the third season, and the fact that my theories involving onto why it was cancelled because of the failure of parents, which is mainly my theory. I would think that if I watch more episodes from the 3rd season, I will probably have more questions and more theories onto how it just isn't the same like it was in the first 2 seasons. See, all you want that I didn't focus on watching more of the episodes lately, but at the same time, just by watching this episode, it really goes to show what season 3 really is. I give this episode a 4.5 out of 10.